Hello, everybody. And this isn't going to be a usual upload where I just want to give my thoughts and opinions on a matter that happened this week. It has to do with Russell Wilson, obviously, as you can see in the title, and my honest opinion about you know, why Sean Payton is potentially getting rid of him. I'm going to pull some things. This is mostly going to be from the top of my head, non scripted, FYI. So if I seem to bumble around or repeat some things, that is why, but I'm going to try my best not to not to do that. So Russell Wilson, was benched for Stidham, and it has now become apparent that he is going to be cut in March because Sean Payton doesn't want him. Um who knows if you know Russell's relationship with the team is what it should be, but all of these things. I'm Some things that I want to say is that I have lived in Colorado near Denver since 2021. That is obviously when they brought 2021 is when, or wait, no, sorry. Oh my goodness. Um So this is the second season where Russell has been playing here in 2022, and he got brought here, as we know, and traded for Drew Lock, the tight end Noah Fant, a couple first round picks, and numerous other picks. And essentially that's all the Seahawks had to trade, and they were able to get a very, very high pick because of that in this year's draft. And the Broncos, to my recollection, did not have any picks in the first round of this year's draft. Then comes last year, and everyone was trying to make the case in point that the AFC, the AFC West, I think it is, with the Broncos, Chiefs, Chargers, and Raiders all reside, was going to be the toughest division in football, where, you also had Nathaniel Hackett hired last offseason to be the head coach last year. He didn't survive the year, as everyone knows, because of the colossal failures of the team. Besides the defense was spectacular last year. Arguably, I feel like it could have easily been the best defense, given that they weren't on the field for the majority of the games, because the offense was completely abysmal and non-existent, with some of the same problems that we've seen this year, in my opinion. Um, with that aside, last year we had a few instances where guys were left wide open. They were left wide open, and Russell did not see them. The most notably last year, and I can't remember the player's name at this point. It's not a game worth remembering really, except for as an anecdotal type thing, to analyze the situation. But it was the game against the Colts, and it was a completely bad shit show where Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson played on Thursday night. I remember getting home from driving, and I thought, "Oh, this isn't going to be a game worth watching," and it definitely wasn't, but it was far worse than you would have thought it would have been between two struggling teams last year. And that ended up just being kind of a shit show of a game. I think it was near after where Hackett got fired, who, was brought on as offensive coordinator this year. I feel like if he was really that bad of a coach, he wouldn't just immediately go back to being an offensive coordinator, And, a lot of people wanted to blame Hackett, but good Lord, last year, I can't remember how many times the games were on the line and you get these bad interceptions by Russell Wilson. And the same can be said about this year. There was I'm trying to remember some specific games and whatever else, but I would see the end of games and maybe they wouldn't always end in an interception, but it would be crunch time. They'd be in these tight games and they would end up losing because of the inability of Russ to make throws, and he would just, miss the mark and completely not hit it. And as far as I'm concerned, when you are late into a game and it is a close game, as far as I'm concerned, your previous pass attempts might as well not have happened. You might as well be playing the game as if it's 0-0 or a one score type of game in order to win. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. One of my opinions of football that still kind of stands is that you can have all of these great yards that are essentially empty yards if you cannot close out a game. And I mean, like, one of these recent examples is Nick Mullins threw for 411 yards against the Lions. How many times do you see a guy throw for over 400 and they lose the game? Granted, they only barely lost it, but it's like, the four interceptions, you wonder how many of those yards didn't lead to anything, to any points, anything that is a lasting stat on the board. With that being said, Russell Wilson has a good stat sheet this year, but that doesn't always lead to having a successful career. I remember, a player that I would say has been marred by this kind of opinion before he went to the Rams was Stafford. Dude was amazing for fantasy, had amazing yards every single year he was with the Lions. And it's like, his only super reliable, target that he had was Calvin Johnson. And then he would be getting it done with guys who were no names most of the time. That it's like, oh, these guys aren't dudes that are even going to the Pro Bowl. And, you could say he had really good garbage time and whatever else, but it's the same kind of thing where this player, and what's dumb is that Russell Wilson has been accredited with however many comeback victories. People love to say he's got so many comeback victories, but guess what? He came from a team that had arguably I'll say it, the best defense of the 2010s in the Legion of Boom on Seattle. And it kind of leads me to my next point is like, if he was so good, then why were the Seahawks so willing to trade him? Yes, they're getting a boatload for him, but if he was really that good, then you would not be looking for a team that, clearly better weapons than the Broncos with Metcalf and Lockett. And I mean, who knows if they still would have been able to get JSN? I feel like they still possibly would have, but like in all retrospect, the Seahawks have better weapons, and especially at the time, than the Broncos. Jerry Jeudy is good. He looked, really, really good before he had his ACL tear, a couple years ago, and I just don't think he's been the same since. I think that he's, getting close to where he kind of was. But then you also have Cortland Sutton, who leads me to my next point. All of these games that Russ was supposedly hot, he was leaning heavily on just milking to Cortland Sutton, who was balling out, and looking incredible. Sometimes they say that, like, yeah, when these quarterbacks are balling out, they're more likely to get the MVP award than any of the wide receivers. That's why a wide receiver has never won the award, type of thing, just because a quarterback, I mean, it's valued as a higher position, and wide receiver, directly correlates with the quarterback, usually not the other way around, unless you're just a true baller like, I don't know, Terry McLaurin, over all these years, not having a true, like, even franchise QB because of the shuffling there. And some of these other guys, to be honest with you, you could even say, Brown, AJ Brown, was the same way because honestly, Tannehill at his peak was good, but he wasn't like the most prolific thrower we've ever seen. Um, and this year, in retrospect of QBs that make the wide receivers or wide receivers that make the QBs look good, there are QBs that make the wide receivers look good. And you can't tell me that Russell Wilson is doing that. And if you are a top 5, you should be a guy who's doing that. Think about CJ Stroud on this team. They don't have anybody. They got rid of Brandon Cooks, the only name they had in that wide receiver core from last year, and it's Tank Dell, you know, uh, that's like doing all the work, and some other players on the Texans that like I'm sure most people couldn't name. But it's like CJ Stroud is making his wide receivers better, more than likely. I don't think that, I don't, they definitely have some chemistry, but he's definitely a special player. Russell Wilson is not a special player. I happened to watch the Sunday night game. I think it was Sunday night where, Patriots and Chiefs, it doesn't really matter, but it's like, oh yeah, or no, sorry. Or Patriots Broncos. Why did I say the Chiefs? Um, but looking at Russell Wilson, one of the things that I analyzed, about his game, just watching him the whole game, is it was unbelievable. The minimum amount of airtime he would put under the ball, and I'm talking about the yards down the field. He was throwing most of his passes were 5 yards or less. And with a couple that he threw downfield where guys caught it, type of thing. And I'm not counting the ones he missed because, you know, those were throwaway type things. But it's crazy to me, that people, I don't understand why people like Russell Wilson so much. I haven't liked him. And, even in watching, if you ever watched like Marshawn Lynch and Richard Sherman when they interviewed, and that, oh yeah, Russell Wilson wanted the big bag or whatever when he was on the Seahawks from his initial extension. I mean, I wouldn't say he didn't earn a paycheck, but he acted like, he was the sole proprietor for why the team was so good. And it led to the dissolvement of the Legion of Boom and into the dark age of the Seahawks. And so many stories have come up, and, some people could say, oh, they say that stuff out of spite or whatever else. But it's like, you know, they were winning. And now all of this coming out, afterwards just shows that he just hasn't ever been a good teammate. And there was animosity in the locker room between the wide receivers and Russell Wilson. And maybe Sean Payton realized that you can't have a team that has the dissension like Russell Wilson has, especially with his wide receivers, and win. It's, in the ultimate team sport of football. And it's like, and the crazy thing is it's not like there's a huge run game that the Broncos can rely on and to use as a smokescreen towards the woes, but who's going to pay Russell Wilson, the contract, the 5-year extension that was supposed to start happening next year, or is? I mean, but if the rumors are true, it sounds like they're going to cut him early March because they're like, yeah, we're cutting our losses. We're not dealing with you. But, the whole situation has just been handled poorly, I think, by like the Broncos or whatever. And I think that they definitely should have waited, at least a year. If they had waited a year from, his first season to this season, they would have been like, well, we're not going to, this is the kind of money we're talking. If you're going to play like this, like you're not going to get hardly anything. And then wait for him to show up and play this year. And it's like, the stats, oh my goodness, stats do not tell the story of the games. And your record speaks more volumes to me than anything else, unless you have a truly abysmal defense, which they did for like the first, month and a half or something, and then they got blown out 70-20 by the Dolphins, and the defense since then has played well. You cannot tell me that the defense hasn't made leaps and bounds on that team. And I respect their defense. I mean, they're pretty much the same personnel they had last year, minus a couple of guys, and they're still a good defense. who's to know if they still have the caliber to play like they did last season, but there's no way they can hold the defense accountable. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion on the whole Russell Wilson situation is that I don't like him as a player. I don't think that, any team should want him in all honesty. I don't know who's going to go for him, thinking of, the NFL and the teams and all of that. It's like I just think that Russell Wilson is insanely overrated and he seems to get a lot more and I don't know if it has to do with his whole God spiel, but looking ahead to next year, it's like, I've heard rumors that people say the Jets are going to go for him. That seems like a huge uh, far conclusion. Looking at this, the only team, I'm looking at all 32 teams here and I'm kind of thinking to myself like who would go for this guy? If there's I guess some potential teams that maybe he would work with. Like I mean I see kind of maybe the Steelers. That sounds far fetched, but it's like they have a good defense. They have some good talent. They really seem to be undecided at quarterback at this point. Mason Rudolph. They've said as a starter and Kenny Pickett, I guess, another headline that he's not happy about it, even though he did not play well, the rest of this year. And Mason Rudolph gave life to the dormant offense of the Steelers, which is what they need. And I mean, if they get hot here at the end of the year, they could still make the playoffs and anything's on the table for them because they have a good defense that can perform. Looking at all the other teams, the Colts, I don't think would be willing because, they're still probably going to go with Richardson. I think he looked rocky, but still potential there. Titans, who knows? Probably not. Will Levis. Falcons, maybe. Maybe. They have a really star studded offense and a pretty good defense, and Ritter doesn't seem to be it. Carolina, I don't think you can say Bryce Young, yeah, you didn't work out, we're not going to play you. He's looked, I mean, he makes some good throws at times, even though the Panthers are just in the doghouse this year. New Orleans, no. Tampa Bay, no. Cardinals, probably not. They like Kyler's brought life to a otherwise, shitty team as well since he's come back. And just all of these other teams, seem to be pretty decided. Maybe Las Vegas. Maybe he would go to Vegas because, yeah, they have Devontae Adams that would be appealing. And who the heck knows what they're going to do at QB. But so many teams now with all of these recent drafts or what's the trades that have gone on and what quarterbacks they have, there's limited vacancies. I feel like that makes sense for Russ to go, unless he does decide to go as a backup to a team. Then, there's so many. Or maybe he goes to New England. Maybe New England's foolish enough that, oh, yeah, we're not going to go with Zappy or Jones. But, yeah, it's curious to me, the theoretical, approaches of where Russ is going to go, and it's way too early to tell. But yeah, there's not that many teams. There's not that many teams that are like, oh yeah, we need this guy. And there's been so much already. And I mean, I guess I heard. I guess I heard, and I guess I have no. Yeah, I have no idea really. Where he would go. To be honest with you, and that's besides the point. I think that with him we could see easily. oh, he's gonna take a deal that's gonna have a ton of prove-its or something like that because it's not a good sign on your record that they're just gonna cut you after Denver, took you in and, gave you the Peyton Manning treatment, even better so, I think, but, that's all I really have to say about Russell Wilson, and, if you have any takes or opinions or anything you'd like to comment, just let me know, um, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the Friday podcast.